Hello, and welcome to the Trauma Uncomplicated podcast, where we untangle the ways complex trauma formed you and your relationships and give you the tools to get your grounded, true self back in the driver's seat. My name is Christy Morgan, and I'm a relational trauma therapist.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I love fall. I
Yes.
go slower in the fall morning though. I don't
Mhm.
know, but I do.
I
Yeah.
think our systems are just kind of made for that, like to kind of go with the seasons.
Yeah, a little slower. How are you arriving today, Christy?
I'm doing well. Yeah. It's
Good.
been a smooth morning so far. So,
Good.
yeah.
Lovely to hear that. Lovely to hear.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk to you too. I mean, I think polyvagal theory is something that a lot of people don't know about, and it's a huge game changer when we know how our nervous systems work. So I'm just so grateful to have you on our
Hmm.
podcast. And yeah.
Yeah, it it's it's transformed my practice
Hmm.
when I first got introduced to it. And for all the various modalities that I know,
Yeah.
that really does feel foundational because um, we all have a, a nervous system.
Hmm.
While you have a unique experience and I have a unique experience, we all have a nervous system.
Yeah.
And that nervous system has qualities to it that are the same
Hmm.
across every person. And so in therapy, it's a really helpful aid
Yeah.
to understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, before we totally dive in,
Yes, I think Barbara, slow down.
I would love just to start by asking what makes you you?
I saw that question. I was like, boy, that feels like I'm in grad school with that philosophy teacher again. And I was
Yes.
like, how many ways to answer that?
Mm.
Um, so you can see I'm still pondering
Yeah, it's a hard
what makes
question.
me. It really is a great question. And I really did think about it as I am right now. And I think the way I'd like to respond, and I think already my response is incomplete
Hmm.
because I am so much more than this moment.
Right.
So, what makes me me is my history
Mm.
contributes to me, my purpose of today
Mm.
contributes to me, and my anticipation of where I imagine I'm going.
Yeah.
I think that is all. And then on another level, what makes me me are my personality, my characteristics, my values. My
Hmm.
values. A primary value is family for me.
Mm.
And I'm smiling because I think I'll get to see my grandchildren today.
Yes.
So I'm super
Oh.
happy.
Mm.
And so I think that makes me me are my values that I align with and I live by. And my physical body, my emotional body, my mind body, and that which is unexpressionable, but there. It's a very
Hmm.
complicated
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just hearing like you're gathering all these elements of you. You're not just one thing, but even noticing your interconnectedness with your family and with your values, your past and your future in the present moment right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So simple question, very
Mhm.
intriguing thought process I went through. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you started to touch on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear, you mentioned that polyvagal theory has totally transformed your practice.
Mhm.
What led you to becoming so passionate in that in
Mhm.
particular?
What led me to become passionate and dive deep into polyvagal theory? I guess it resonated, like the truth of it really resonated with me.
Mm.
And then when I created my own hypotheses, like, I wonder if blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
then and it proved to be true. So it resonated for me as a person. And then in my work and in my interactions with people,
Mhm.
it seemed to come up as like, and it's true, and it's true, and it's true. And then really importantly, it depathologized. So a
Mhm.
lot of times people come in and they say, I'm so broken. I'm so
Mhm.
broken and nothing's ever going to change. It's always going to be like this. And I'm like, but wait.
Yes.
Can I tell you about this thing? And it's based upon science.
Mhm.
And, I happen to be a really big nerd, a brain nerd, really big. And when I introduce the science behind this, and I show them images of this amazing nerve that we have
Mhm.
from the base of our skull through our body, and
Mhm.
how that nerve is so impactful with trying to keep us alive and safe.
Mhm.
It changes people like, I'm not broken, I'm just surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that if it's not an organic thing, if somebody wasn't born in a certain way, so if it's not organic, that means that maybe we learned to do that out of a
Yeah.
habit to
Mhm.
survive, and we can unlearn that to
Mhm.
thrive.
Yes.
So it's a game changer for me personally. It's a game changer for my clients, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And when I'm teaching other clinicians about it, they relax because they realize, oh, I just we need to do polyvagal work. So it's
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it points a lot to our resilience as humans too, where it's
Mhm.
like you said, like you learn to adapt. You learned this, and it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you are broken. Going back to that question of what makes you you, like you are not your trauma.
Mhm.
But you learn to adapt, and you can continue to learn how to adapt in a healthy way too. And
Yes.
there's science to back that, which is incredible. So,
Yeah. And it the relaxation response that comes up, that it's not me, it's not permanent. It's just
yeah,
so
yeah.
breath-giving and exciting. So that's why as I'm lining up what will I focus in on
Mm,
2025, I was like, well, so I have some favorite teachers in the
mm,
polyvagal field. It's like, where are they and what are they doing? And what
yeah.
new book is out there? Because there's still more and more to learn, in my opinion. So I'm
Mm,
excited
mhm.
about it.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
For people who don't know what polyvagal theory is, could you just
Mhm.
break it down, some of the key concepts?
Yeah. And so, and this is me pausing. Because it is based in science. So I'm
Mhm.
going to throw out some scientific
Great.
phrasing for you. It's based on science. And we want to credit Dr. Stephen Porges for
Mhm.
his work that he did in the 1980s. And Dr. Porges is a psychiatrist, and he was studying, and he found a nerve, and it's the
Mhm.
vagus nerve.
Mhm.
And he discovered that the vagus nerve, which is one of the longest nerves in the body, breaks into two, hence the phrase polyvagal.
Mhm.
Poly meaning more than one, so two. And that polyvagal theory says that we have survival instincts that go from collapse. It's the best
Mhm.
thing to do right now as I'm under threat is to
Mhm.
collapse, go dorsal, disconnect, dissociate,
Mhm.
because that's the best way to survive right now. So
Mhm.
polyvagal, that would be the dorsal vagal response.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other part of the vagus nerve is the ventral vagal.
Mhm.
Ventral vagal is going to be more in the upper body, around the face, the neck, the shoulders, the vocal cords, the hearing. In the
Mhm.
ventral vagal, when we're perceiving safety
Mhm.
and we don't have to protect and defend, we're going to go autonomically or naturally up into our ventral vagal, which is like it's safe to stay and play. It's safe
Yeah.
to engage. So polyvagal theory has three primary principles, and it's a way how we adapt to survive based upon our perception of threat. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hierarchical meaning that it goes in a progressive order, which is great for people, therapists. So
Mm-hmm.
if a person comes and they're in a dorsal reflex where they're down and collapsed, as a therapist, we're going to go from dorsal to the sympathetic response,
Mm-hmm.
which is fight or flight, and then maybe from the sympathetic up to the ventral. So it's hierarchical. It goes
Mm-hmm.
predictably up, predictably down. Hierarchical,
Mm-hmm.
like up a ladder, down a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
It's also based upon the other principle is neuroception.
Mm-hmm.
Neuroception is a phrase coined by Stephen Porges that says, just under my level of consciousness, I'm perceiving safety and threat. Neuroception. How am I perceiving safety and threat? And then the
Mm-hmm.
third principle under polyvagal theory is regulation, co-regulation. We
Mm-hmm.
are mammals and we're designed to be in community. And so, can we get co-regulation? Can I self-regulate? So,
Yeah, yeah.
I tried to break that down into the three primary principles and
Mm-hmm.
define polyvagal in and of itself. Was that too
Yeah,
much? Was that too much,
no, that was
Christy?
perfect. And, I want to jump into that neuroception piece
Yes. Yeah.
because I think for a lot of my clients, and I just notice, in myself too, having a
Mhm.
background with trauma, is that um, what we may sense as a threat
Mhm.
may not actually be a threat. And especially
Mhm.
with couples, I see people who they hear something from their partner that as a therapist, I'm hearing it from a little bit clearer lens of like,
Yeah.
okay, they're reaching out to you, but for them,
Mhm.
it might feel like an attack because their
Mhm.
sense of what is dangerous and what is not has been adapted to their traumatic environment. So when
Mhm.
it comes to growing up in a traumatic environment,
Mhm.
having
Mhm.
complex trauma, how does that calibrate our ability to detect a threat?
Mm. How does that calibrate our ability to detect a threat?
Or I guess
So,
calibrate the way that we
yeah,
detect a threat. Yeah.
yeah, I hear what you're saying, and so remember how I said earlier when you said what makes me me,
Hmm.
I am my history, and
Hmm.
hopefully I'm living my history from an integrated, healed space.
Yeah.
Okay, so because I have a traumatic history, and once upon a time I would sense threat. For me,
Hmm.
a white t-shirt equated threat.
Hmm.
And I was like,
Oh,
oh, that something's off. That is
yeah.
not threat, but oh my gosh, my nervous system is giving me sweaty palms, rapid heart rate, dry mouth, speeding thoughts.
Mm.
My autonomic, and the key word there is autonomic,
Mhm.
meaning it's happening all on its own. I didn't ask it to
Mhm.
happen. My
Mhm.
autonomic nervous system took me into a state of a sympathetic reflex, meaning I'm in fight or flight.
Mhm.
Danger is perceived.
Mhm.
Therefore, what can I do?
Right.
Do I need to flee? Do I need to collapse? And so my nervous system, it only knows to keep me safe.
Mhm.
And through the course of therapy and really good work, I can now see a white t-shirt and see a white t-shirt,
Mhm.
but know that once upon a time, long time ago, that did mean danger was coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love my nervous system. My
Mhm.
nervous system has kept me alive, has kept me going, has kept me fairly sane most of the
Mhm.
time, and and has informed me pathways to living a more full life. And
Mhm.
so you're right, when a nervous system has been, what's the word I want to look for, Christy? Has been told over and over again, white t-shirts equate danger. I'm going to believe it
Yeah.
until I have enough evidence to say maybe it's not. And then I need to go
Mhm.
do the work and pull that apart and reorganize it.
Mhm.
I just
Yeah.
want to check in. Does it feel like I answered that question?
It does feel like you answered it. Yes, I think
Okay.
what I'm hearing is that like we are learning to be able to no longer see something that in actuality is harmless, but
Mhm.
used to be a threat. We can now see it through a clearer lens because we've done that healing work. And my
Right.
question for you is, when it comes to being stuck in this place of like, okay, I can tell myself as much as I
Mhm.
want, white t-shirt is not dangerous,
Right.
but I still can't get that to translate in my body. What does
Sure.
polyvagal theory say about that?
Well, because that's the longest journey. A very wise person
Mm.
said the longest journey is 12 inches
Hmm.
from our prefront, from our thinking to our feeling,
Hmm.
right? Because I can know a lot of things,
Yeah.
but my body holds a story too. And
Yeah.
unless we let the body speak, unless
Mhm.
we let the body express, then the body story stays suppressed or hidden.
Mhm.
So polyvagal has helped me understand how there can be such a disconnect.
Mhm.
My brain is thinking this, but my body is doing this. Why can't
Yeah.
they line up? Why can't they line up? And that's where the work of a trauma informed therapist or
Mhm.
people who do somatic work, people who
Mhm.
work and listen to the body.
Mhm.
Um, like in my work, I'll go back to my work. When I was working on the white t-shirt, my body needed to rage. My
Yeah.
body needed to shudder and shake. My
Mhm.
body needed to have its unspoken story. And then there was this lovely alignment between what I know is true and what I feel is true. I got my feeling back in the story
Yeah.
because my body was holding it. Yeah.
I'm
So
hearing
that's
like
those two.
I'm
Go
hearing
ahead.
completing that cycle, like letting your
Yeah,
body do what it needed to do originally, but maybe
absolutely.
wasn't able to do
Yeah.
because it wasn't safe at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't once upon a time because while I love every bit and piece of my brain, when we have trauma stored in our brain, it actually doesn't know time. It doesn't know. It
Mm-hmm.
flashes back, right?
Yeah.
White t-shirt comes into the room. My brain doesn't know that I'm 33 years old. My
Hmm.
brain just says a whole bunch of things and goes into a sympathetic response because danger is fast approaching. So parts of my brain really get limited in time and space. So I have what some might say is a dysregulated response,
Mhm.
but I might say, no, based upon what my brain is thinking, that feels really appropriate.
Yeah.
And imagine telling that to a client, boy, that is so understandable. Your brain's responding that way,
Right.
right?
Just
Not like
takes
really
that shame
normal.
down.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It takes
Yeah.
the shame down. And when shame can leave the room, what can come in but maybe compassion,
Yeah.
maybe curiosity,
Hmm.
maybe a pathway to integration and healing. So,
Yeah.
yes, love my brain. Yes.
I love hearing you even speak about your own nervous system in your brain. Like it's clear you have developed a relationship with yourself that is so based on compassion. And a lot of that, I think I'm hearing, comes from understanding. Like, I can
Mhm.
see why you would react to this white t-shirt. It's okay. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
you're doing exactly what I need you to do,
Yeah.
but we're okay right now. And being able to like
Yeah.
extend that compassion and come
Yeah.
alongside of it rather than,
Yeah.
would you stop being upset at that white t-shirt? Like,
Right. Right.
it's
Which
not
is
a big deal, you know?
which is what I did for decades, which is
Hmm.
what I did for decades until I got real with it and I faced the fear and I got curious about the fear.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that to me is the biggest thing is curiosity because fear and curiosity, they cannot coexist. When
Mm.
I'm in a fear state of mind, I'm fight or flight. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do to get safe?
Hmm.
If curiosity is in the room, I slow down, I lean
Mm.
in, I open up.
Yeah.
And so that's a journey too. From
Hmm.
from like I shouldn't be afraid, but oh my gosh, I can't stop being afraid.
Yeah.
And that's where in that safe co-regulation with the safe other,
Mm-hmm.
we can, the client can um, maybe tether to
Mm-hmm.
your nervous system or my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're really frantic,
Yeah.
they're looking at us and they're pulling on our nervous system in
Mm-hmm.
order to breathe and be,
Mm-hmm.
even though there's so much fear.
Yeah. So I'm hearing being able to connect with other people who can almost be an anchor for us when we feel dysregulated because their nervous system is able to be regulated. That can be a way of journeying from the head to the heart. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, maybe for people who don't have that kind of relationship in their lives yet,
Mhm. Mhm.
how can they start making that journey from the head to the heart?
Oh, yeah. So you noticed I took a really deep breath, you know? And so I'm delighted. So my deep breath was because that it's like, oh, I was there once upon a
Yeah.
time, you know, feeling really
Mhm.
alone and not trusting of people. And
Mhm.
I'm really grateful for these things that I intuitively did. And
Mhm.
now when I read research and science and I listen to my teachers, it's like, oh, now science is backing this up. I'm so excited. And
Yeah.
so if we do not have safe other to provide co-regulation,
Mhm.
we can still get it from animals, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Love our dog. We had a little dog named Sony Girl, and
Mhm.
I just like Sony would just you
Mhm.
can see me like Sony would just be there. So
Yeah.
mammal to mammal doesn't have to be human to human. It can be, interspecies.
Mhm. Yeah.
So an animal can be helpful co-regulator.
Mhm.
Nature is the
Mhm.
ultimate healer. And
Mhm.
I live in the beautiful state of Colorado. And so I happen to have the privilege of looking in a certain direction and seeing this amazing vista of mountains,
Mhm.
or just standing around trees and feeling the breeze, putting my feet in the grass,
Mhm.
hugging a tree, smelling a flower,
Mhm.
closing my eyes and just listening to nature.
Mhm.
So nature, so we can co-regulate with animals,
Mhm.
with nature,
Mhm.
just delicious nature.
Love that. Yeah.
Music too.
Mhm.
Music, certain tones of music will soothe our nervous system. And in fact, just putting a little thing about music is that polyvagal theory, I mentioned Stephen Porges earlier.
Mhm.
Well, he, in addition to polyvagal theory, he developed a protocol about how to retrain our brain, our ears to hear. Because if
Mhm.
we are consistently in trauma,
Yeah.
our ears won't even sense safety.
Hmm.
It's
Wow.
too much information that I won't share right now. But when I'm working with clients and they just can't get to a sense of safety, I'm like, hey, let's explore your ear and see if it mechanically can't hear. And there's this thing you can do to help your ear hear and sense safety.
Wow.
So music, prosodic voice. Love listening to books on audio and that
Mhm.
prosodic voice going up and down.
Mhm.
So there are a number of ways. And then,
Yeah.
of course, we can just hug ourselves. And there are techniques, a havening technique that we could
Mhm.
help physically, so many ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm hearing just like find a way to connect with something beyond
Yeah.
yourself. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a human, it doesn't have to be your partner if they're not available for that, but
Mhm.
find something that you can connect with. And that in
Yeah.
itself is regulating just to be able to reach out
Yeah.
beyond yourself.
And to add to that, regulating. What is regulating? Regulating
Mhm.
is I'm in this moment, in my body,
Mhm.
in this space.
Mhm.
Regulating doesn't mean I have to be happy. That's not regulated.
Yeah.
Regulated is I'm here and fully present and feeling my grief
Mm.
or feeling the delight of my granddaughter's giggle.
Mm.
That so just to be clear, what is regulated? It doesn't mean happy. It
Mm.
means here.
Hmm. I love that you made that distinction because I think it's such an important one. And being able to be regulated through life is not about just, being this happy, optimistic, positive
Mhm.
person. It just means being present. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that is
And
something that I think a lot of us miss. So,
being present, and what is present, being embodied. That
mm,
idea of, my head thinks this and my body's doing that.
mhm,
When people do the work that their mind and their body truly line up,
mhm,
maybe for the first time in decades and decades, they're realizing I have a body and my
mm,
body is a safe place to be again. And they
mm,
can live in their body again.
mhm,
And regulation doesn't mean stuck and happy. One of the questions is about the please and appease, the fawning,
mhm,
and
mhm.
that's stuck. That's a survival response. Regulation means I know
Mhm.
where I am and how to leave where I am. I'm
Yeah.
dropping into sympathetic. Oh, I'm dipping into dorsal. Okay, let me do this, let me do that, and come up to be fluid, to be fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sure
beautiful.
you have more
Yeah.
questions. Sorry,
No,
Christy.
it's so great. And I love all that you're bringing and just connecting the dots because it's one thing for it to be theory and it's another for it to be lived experience. And you're speaking to
Yeah,
that lived experience of this theory. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about resilience.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, how does polyvagal theory support the idea that resilience is something that you can cultivate
Oh, I love
and
that.
not that you're just stuck in your trauma?
Right. 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 Well, I'm a living example of resilience then, right? Because
Mhm. Yeah.
again, white t-shirt. And so I'm a living, and
Mm,
how does polyv so I think it gives us the pathway to change.
mm,
I think it gives us data and information about what triggers us.
mm,
And when we find that, and I don't like the word trigger, but it seems to be the industry standard. When we find what I call the access point to the pain and to the healing. So
mm,
for me, that's the access point of information that maybe is stuck in trauma mind, trauma brain.
mhm,
And so polyvagal for me shows me things like
mhm,
like an x-ray technician.
mm,
They're looking at an x-ray. It's like, oh, the x-ray technician can see, oh, you have a spiral fracture. Let's do this and it will heal.
yeah.
For me, polyvagal, as I'm watching the client and seeing the nervous system responding with certain things that are said or done, I'm like, oh, we're dropping into a sympathetic reflex. We're in a fight or flight. There's a threat being perceived. I might say, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
Well, Barbara, when you leaned in and you smiled and you tilted your head that way, yeah, I got really afraid and I want to
Mm,
cry now.
mm,
Okay, let's
yeah.
be right there. Let's be right there. I'm going to sit back. Does this feel better when I sit back? And does it feel better if I look over here?
Mm.
So it gives me information that I might not otherwise get. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I love that you're saying like an access point. And
Yeah.
this reminds me of something you said earlier about how polyvagal theory helped you move away from this like pathological view,
Mhm.
but instead, to be able to see a trigger or an access point as
Mhm.
information that then gives you a roadmap. Like, okay, now that I know what to do. I'm not
Yeah.
stuck here. Whereas if we
Right.
look at it as a trigger, we're seeing it
Right.
as,
Right.
oh, there's something wrong with me and I need to avoid it, which
Right.
makes it worse. So,
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And so adding to it with some enthusiasm
Mm-hmm.
because I'm human too.
Mm-hmm.
So in that example, I might lean forward, I might smile, I might tilt my head. And most people, don't perceive that as a threat. So
Right.
once upon a time, I might have said, what's wrong with you? What, like,
Mhm.
I'm being nice right now. And now I can look at it and say, oh, we
Mhm.
just came upon something important.
Mhm.
And so I, as the therapist, or I, as the spouse or the mother or whatever, I can lean back and not take it personally and
Yeah.
just look at the information happening and
Hmm.
be with it still from an open, spacious, compassionate, grounded, anchored spot. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. And I feel like that can be a whole other conversation of when you are witnessing your partner or your friend or family member
Mhm,
having, a trauma response.
mhm,
How
mhm.
can we look at it through this lens of like, oh, this is information. Now I know how to respond to you so you feel safe rather than taking it personally. And then it turns
Yeah.
into a conflict and confirms the person's belief that I
Yeah.
was in danger. Uh,
Yes. And
um,
the pre-step to that, everything you just said, yes, the pre-step is, am I coming from my ventral vagal, where
mhm,
it's safe to connect? Am I coming from my sympathetic, where
mhm.
I might feel threatening? Or am I coming from my dorsal, where you can't even talk to me? So where am I
Mhm.
coming from? Where am I,
Mhm.
where am I coming from? And that's my personal responsibility to
Mhm.
know where I am and to name it. Like I've been with my beloved for 41 years, and we've learned to say to each other, babe, I've had a day and I'm really prickly. I'm needing a little space. It's like I'm not really approachable right in this moment. I love you and I know I'm prickly now. So
Mhm.
I just want
Mhm.
to heads up and I'm checking out for give me an hour.
Yeah.
And now I'm aware of where I am in my nervous system, ventral, sympathetic, or dorsal. I'm
Mhm.
clearly communicating in a
Mhm.
loving, kind, direct way. And then
Mhm.
he doesn't take it personally and blah, 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 blah. And then when we come
Yeah.
together, we're both back in our ventral.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful way of respecting the other person too, of like, hey, I
Yeah.
have this awareness about myself and I'm going to
Yeah.
let you have this information so that you can also know I'm not wanting to hurt you. I'm actually
Yeah.
wanting to respect you.
Yes.
And
Yes. So
yeah.
that's where, like in couples therapy, if a couple could know where they are in their own nervous
Mhm.
system,
Mhm.
then they can communicate it and then talk about resiliency, then that relationship can be supporting each other, not dragging each other down.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, zooming out a little bit, when it
Yeah.
comes to building resiliency, what are some first steps a person can take to start building that resiliency in themselves?
Mm. And so for me, I have this thing that I call the ABCs DE.
Hmm.
For me, the first step to anything is awareness.
Mhm.
And so awareness. Am I aligned and behaving according to my values? Practicing that moment to moment awareness of how am I behaving? What am I thinking? How's
Mhm.
my energy? And in that awareness, taking a breath, taking a pause, and then going into curiosity
Mhm.
and making a choice, um, because that will determine your experience. So,
Mhm.
what can people do? I would say first, have your own awareness. And
Mhm.
are you feeling embodied and present? Or
Mhm.
are you feeling out of center? And if you're out of center,
Mhm.
take a breath, get curious,
Mhm.
and what choice do you want to make? Like my example, the choice I made was just to be vulnerable and say, beloved, I'm prickly. I need to just go for a walk and I'll be safe. I need to go for a walk.
Mhm.
And even though it was dark, he's like, blah, 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 I'm like, babe, I'm gonna be fine. Like, but
Mhm.
I knew what I needed to do. So
Mhm.
awareness, breath, curiosity, and choice will determine your experience.
Mhm.
First thing to do is awareness. Second thing is to breathe. Now, I talked about the autonomic nervous system. And
Mhm.
one of the things our autonomic nervous system does, which I love, is I breathe without thinking. I
Yeah.
blink without thinking. I
Mhm.
sweat without thinking. I cry, without thinking. Autonomic nervous system. But the powerful thing about breath is that I can mindfully breathe too.
Mhm.
And so what I know is that when I do an extended exhale, like I breathe
Mhm.
in, and then the extended exhale with a maybe pursed lip,
Mm.
That can't help but communicate to my nervous system, chill out,
Mm.
relax. There is no saber-toothed tiger. We
Mhm.
would not be breathing long and slow if there was danger afoot.
Mm. Mhm.
Awareness, a long, extended breath, are just two of the very quick and easy ways
Mm.
to build your resilience.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah, being
Mm.
able to step in and be like, okay, we're gonna breathe through this and we're gonna be okay and we're gonna see that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I
And
think,
and it's a very mindful breath.
yeah,
It's not the right.
right.
It's a very, very long, and when it's a forced, like when
Mm.
it's a pressured breath out, there is something about the pressured breath that, I don't know, exaggerates and tells the nervous system we
Mm.
must be safe here and now because we're breathing this way.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So you talked about awareness,
Yeah.
and I recognize that for many, they have been so disconnected from their bodies that
Yeah.
just having been in survival mode for so long,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's hard to even detect what's happening in their bodies.
Yeah.
So, what are some signs that people can look for that will just be an easy way to know, like, okay, maybe I am dysregulated right now? Like, what are some
Mhm.
easy on the surface ways that they can detect that for themselves?
Mm. That they're dysregulated.
Hmm.
I think maybe to educate and understand what is dysregulated. So earlier I talked about I had sweaty palms, I had a
Yeah.
rapid heart rate. Like that's actually not normal. That's a sympathetic response. But for someone who's maybe lived in
Hmm.
that fight or flight response,
Hmm. Hmm.
to educate themselves what would be a, a response when you're in a ventral vagal, sympathetic, or dorsal. So
Hmm.
maybe education and to recognize, oh, let me check in with myself. I'm actually, my mind is spinning and I'm not here now. What's going on? So might go back to those ABCs, begins with awareness, but that educational part. And
Hmm.
if a person finds themselves dysregulated, be kind, right? Just I would
Hmm.
begin with loving kindness. I would
Hmm.
begin with compassion. I
Hmm.
would begin with breathing.
Hmm.
And maybe for me, I carry a lot of tension in my neck and shoulders and just rolling, moving
Hmm.
your body a little bit if you want to.
Hmm.
If the body is in a collapsed dorsal state, maybe don't move it, but become aware of it.
Hmm.
The other day, I was having someone just oh so barely touching their hands to each other, almost
Mm,
in this prayer position, and just beginning to sense. So
mm,
it's a high focus,
yeah.
high attention, it's visual, it's somatic, and bringing all their attention right there. Help them be aware
Mm,
of the head of the body. And
mm,
then if there is oh my gosh, I have a body, if there is a response to that, be kind and be patient. There's
mm,
a reason you've been living disconnected,
mm,
and there's a reason that it's okay to connect again.
mhm. Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that compassion again is such an important piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing what is regulation, what is not, it's
Hmm.
going to show up very physiological.
Hmm.
Uh, what are way I wonder if I could ask you, what are ways that you might have noticed when you're out of sync or when you're in sync? What for you is regulation or not regulation for you,
Yeah,
Christy?
I get really big pain in my
Mhm,
neck and then in my jaw.
mhm,
I also notice that I feel like this buzzing sensation inside
mhm,
my body, like under
mhm,
the skin, under the
mhm,
surface. It's not
mhm. Yeah.
visible, but
Mhm,
everything's buzzing inside.
mhm.
And then, usually I'll feel hot in the face.
Yeah.
Um, these are like signs that for me, oh my gosh, I am not feeling safe. And maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but I noticed for myself, it's a very internal thing, like that buzzing. It's almost
Mhm.
like there's this instinct inside of me that wants to fight back, but it's
Mhm.
holding it in and the
Mhm.
jaw is clenching it
Mhm.
in.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little bit to people like me who
Mhm.
maybe have this people pleasing fawn response, or they just kind of lock down within themselves when they feel
Mhm.
under threat?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just
Mhm.
speak a little bit to that and
Mm.
what that's about.
And what that's about. So when uh, lockdown, so I want to do and I lock it down.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in this cognitive dissonance, we're in this dilemma of
Mm-hmm.
I want to and I won't.
Yeah.
At the foundation of our species is survive at all cost. Survive at all cost.
Mm-hmm.
And here, years and years ago, there was a person who was bouldering, who was climbing rocks, and they got stuck, and their arm got stuck. And the only way they were going to survive is to sever their arm. So when I say survive at all cost, that's a pretty extreme example of how that person survived at the cost of their arm,
Mm-hmm.
where they had to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So then imagine as a young child, I want to speak up and it's too dangerous, so I'll lock it down. So it's a survival reflex.
Mm-hmm.
And the pathway to that is to love on and give compassion to that survival reflex.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also an internal family systems or parts therapist. So from that perspective, we're like, yeah, little one, boy, that's really scary. And do you see me now? Do you see where I am now? And you can relax with me now. So we
Mm-hmm.
love on and take care of those parts of us that want to do that for sake of survival. And
Mm-hmm.
and other things that we can do is we can physically massage. Like, so if there's a place, the jaw is a popular place, massage and breathe into.
Mm-hmm.
There's this thing that I've learned that we can add to or subtract from. So in that situation, I might massage and I might breathe into, adding to, it's like it's spacious here, it's safe here. It's 2024 now. That was scary then, and now we're safe. And when I breathe out, I might breathe out some angst, some fear.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot more work. Like these are quick ideas.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a so I just caveat, these are things that a person could do themselves, and the work is there to do with safe other person.
Right, right.
Yeah.
These are helpful tools, but they're not going to do the full healing. We have to really dig deeper than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you were talking about like there's that um kind of pulling against each other of like I want to, but I won't. And I think that speaks a lot to the self-abandonment that we learn when we grow up with trauma is
Yeah.
like I will protect myself at all costs. And sometimes the cost is abandoning ourselves, which comes
Yeah.
out in that people pleasing and
Yeah.
that fawn
Yeah.
response. Yeah.
It
Mhm.
does. I don't know if you're familiar with Gabor Mate, a
Mhm. Mhm.
prolific author. Okay. So have you seen or heard Gabor talk about that we have drives as a species, we have drives,
Mhm.
and we have one drive. It's innate to all of us. We have a drive for connection. We have a
Mhm.
drive to connect. It's an imperative, a biological imperative that we connect. We
Mhm.
also have a drive for safety.
Mhm.
And Gabor says that if we had to sacrifice one over the other, we will sacrifice that sense of safety for connection,
Yeah.
right? And so when
Mhm.
we talk about abandoning self, because we have to have connection,
Yeah.
even if we need to sacrifice safety. Does
Mhm.
that And
Yeah.
so, what we're doing when we do our work is when we are reclaiming ourselves, we're reclaiming that sense of, I can be
Mhm.
safe and connected. Oh my gosh, what?
Yeah.
I remember hearing that somebody put that
Uh,
together so eloquently. I can be safe and connected. And there was just this collapse of
Oh,
joyful tears and expression to be safe and connected. I actually have goosebumps remembering
yeah,
that.
me too, actually. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so then we're
Hmm.
not abandoning ourselves
Hmm.
for the sake of connection.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I love what you were saying about even from that internal family systems framework of coming alongside that wounded part and being like, okay, like I'm here, it's
Mhm.
2024 now.
Mhm.
And even just starting with connecting with ourselves, helping that wounded
Yeah.
part feel safe
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And connecting with ourselves from again that ventral vagal.
Yeah.
In IFS, we call it self energy. When
Mm-hmm.
I connect with that part from a critical place,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking from a loving, compassionate, curious place, so
Yes.
little thing there.
Yeah. A little very important thing.
Very important thing. Thank you, Christy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear from you a little bit now that we've been talking about self-abandonment. What does it mean to come home to yourself?
Oh, I love that. What does it mean to come home to yourself? Barbara's definition, there might
Yeah.
be, right? So Barbara's definition is to be embodied, to
Mm,
be embodied, to realize I've got 10 toes, I've got a scalp, and I've got everything in between. For me,
mm,
what does it mean to come home is to be in the vehicle that carries my essence around,
mm,
as opposed to being a body, a mind body, or a spirit. They actually get to collaborate,
mm,
coexist,
mm,
be in harmony together. And I can't help but have this bright, bright smile because it's only been recently in the past, well, for all the work I've done, I feel like I've just landed more deeply in the past 4 years.
mm. Wow.
And I know I was shocked because I thought I was home. And then I did some more work and I was like,
Mhm,
so there's
mm,
always work to be done from my spirit. But for me, it's letting myself take up space and feeling safe. It's speaking my truth and feeling courageous.
yeah.
It's enjoying this vehicle that carries me around and celebrating
Mhm,
it and loving on it.
mhm,
It's watching the moments of the bird or the laughter and delighting in the moments. It's being
mm,
fully here, fully now, and fully present.
mm.
That to me is coming home to myself, I think, for the moment.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. And I love it. I thank you for sharing that. Like, this has been a long journey for you. And once you think you arrive, there's so much deeper you can go. And how much hope that brings of like, yeah, like you might even be listening right now and feel like, oh, I'm in a good place. And there's still so much more. And if we keep working toward building that compassion toward ourselves and getting to know ourselves, like we can experience an even deeper sense of being home.
We can if we choose to, if we want to.
Mm,
I was so content for decades and decades. I
mm,
was so content. But because I do stay open and curious,
yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know. It's my boys play video games.
Mm.
And I remember one time they were like, there was a big scream. I was like, hey, what's going on? Like there was a secret level. I didn't know about the secret level.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that is so cool.
Mm,
And I'm like, "Ah, I didn't know there was a secret level."
yeah.
Because I was very content and happy. I didn't know there was a secret level. And
Mm,
so there, and I don't know if there's another one, but I'm just going to continue journeying
yeah.
with curiosity, loving kindness, compassion,
Mm,
and I don't know, but I'm happy where I am, and I was happy where I was,
mm,
and I didn't know there was a secret level. Isn't that cool?
mm. So cool. I love that. What a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, I love my life. It's like I'm pointing over there because I'm at my home office, and that's where I heard the owl. Oh my gosh! I'm
Yeah.
like, Yeah.
Well, when the road feels long, and you've already spoken a little bit to how it's
Mhm.
been a long road for you,
Mhm.
what do you hold on to for hope for you to be able to keep going? What do you hold on
Mm.
to?
Mm. Um, I hold on to when I remember to hold on to.
Mhm.
So when I remember to hold on to, I hold on to my breath. For
Mm.
me, breath is the step to action.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
I hold on to, oh, I'm getting choked up. My beloved. Woo! I
Okay.
hold on to my beloved and my best friend. I hold on to Mother Nature.
Mhm.
I hold on to my values. I hold on to my story and where I am now. And
Mm.
remember,
Mhm.
I I'm not stuck. I don't
Mhm.
have to stay stuck. This is a moment.
Mm.
It begins with the breath and it begins with honoring where I
Mm.
am and remembering who I am.
Mm.
I think that's what I tend to do.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much. This was just so wonderful to hear from you. And, even in the tone of your voice and the way that you carry yourself, it's so clear that you have
Mm.
developed this relationship with yourself that's so full of compassion. And
Mm.
um, I love that you bring that to this conversation, that it's more than just, yeah, let's talk about polyvagal theory, but let's
Mm.
talk about coming home to ourselves and feeling embodied and really
Mm.
being able to rest in ourselves
Mm.
and to not feel like we're going to attack ourselves
Yeah.
um, for
Yeah.
not being where we want to be yet.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you
Yeah.
for the invitation. This has been
Mhm.
delightful. And Jiminy Crickets, that went super duper fast.
I know. Yeah, it did. I didn't think we would
Yeah.
get through it all, but we hit most of it.
Ah,
So,
you're very good at that. No, thank you
oh,
for the invitation and
yeah.
conversation and for helping get the word out about this thing called polyvagal theory, that if people get curious about it, it may open up their access points with curiosity and compassion as opposed to criticism and shame.
Mhm.
So I'm delighted to talk about this anytime, Christy.
Thank you. And if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to get in touch with you and possibly work with you as a client, how would they get in touch with you?
My business is called Creative and Caring Counseling,
Mm,
and I'm based in Littleton, Colorado. And my website, my Facebook page is pretty. I keep that pretty going.
mm,
Um, yeah. So my
perfect.
yeah, Creative and Caring Counseling. That was a big deal. It's like, what do I want to call myself? And
Yeah.
I'm both creative and really caring. So that
Mm,
just feels like it fits me.
beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. You are listening to the Trauma Uncomplicated podcast, where we untangle the ways complex trauma formed you and your relationships and give you the tools to get your grounded, true self back in the driver's seat. If you are ready to take that next step and dive deep into your healing, visit relationalhealingco.com, where we offer tools, resources, and personalized coaching to help you heal your trauma and thrive in your relationships. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or psychological advice. If you are in the United States and you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988 to reach the National Crisis Hotline.